Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you had a good summer weekend. Last week's FIQ tape breakdown was what we never do with the do-it-yourselfer. In just 20 seconds, the advisor calls the client to get totally defensive. And guys, we see our fair share of do-it-yourselfers, and you should be able to capture all their guaranteed money, all their safe money. So if you need to understand the technique or the point that we're making here. So if you did not see that and you ever run into do-it-yourselfers, you need to go back and look at that. Thanks, Paul, for sending me this article. America's hidden economic crisis to widespread wage cuts. Millions of Americans who managed to hold on to their jobs amid the corona pandemic. So this is not talk about the unemployed people. This is the people who still have their jobs, have seen their incomes drop as employers slashed wages, hours to weather what they expected would be a short downturn. Now, with the virus raging and the recession deepening, these cuts that were meant to be temporary could turn permanent or even pave the way for further layoffs. That could portend deep damage to the labor market and the economy because so many workers have kept their jobs with less money to spend than a few years ago. But at least 4 million U.S. workers have received pay cuts since February, even as they continue to work, and millions more have seen pay freezes. Other estimates put it higher, roughly 7 million workers likely to receive a dock in pay. Combined with those who have been forced to log in fewer hours, the number climbs to 20 million, or 1 in 8 workers. Unlike job losses, which are disproportionately affecting low-income workers, here's the big thing, guys. These pay cuts were mostly hitting workers in white-collar industries, according to the ADP data. 3/4 of the cuts in pay were for the top 40% of wage earners, which is the people that we are interested in, right? So they're seeing the big pay cuts, and those are the people that drive the economy. So are we out of this situation? Not even close. Not even close. So one of the things I want to talk about is what we run into with our. I ask. Well, here's a great example of that. How many? I just saw on the nightly news last night. They had a 3 or 4 minute news clip, which is a big significance. That's 10% of their whole telecast was about day traders. How many freaking millennials now think they're stock market geniuses because they got in at the bottom here in March? Yes. And have you ever heard the adage that when the taxi cab driver starts giving you tips on stocks, what does that pretend to the stock market? Yeah. So what I want to, I think this is about a 9-minute video, but this is something that we deal with ourselves, but more importantly, we deal with the people we work with, and it's something that we have to overcome. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. So you have to understand why this happens, and you have to understand how to deal with it. So we're going to watch a little video here that I think you'll find both entertaining and highly enlightening about the people we have to work with every day.
Socrates said the only true wisdom is knowing when you know nothing. But that's not actually easy for humans to do because our brains want us to think that we are awesome. In 1995, MacArthur Wheeler walked into a bank in Pittsburgh ready to rob it. He didn't wear a mask. He didn't have like a fake mustache. He was just there robbing a bank in full view of everyone. He even smiled at the security cameras before leaving and going to a second bank to rob that one too. Later that night, the security footage allowed the police to pick him up and take him off to jail, which shocked him. He was shook. "I wore the juice," he famously exclaimed. Wheeler believed rubbing lemon juice on his skin would render him invisible to videotape cameras. This is a cognitive bias at work, and it inspired 2 psychologists to create some experiments to understand it better. Cognitive biases are everywhere. Have you ever met someone who has one, like perhaps during a group project at school or during an argument with a stubborn uncle or when you had to toil alongside that coworker? You know the one I'm talking about. Somebody who believed they knew things, but really they didn't. Believing you know something you don't is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's named for the 2 psychologists who, upon hearing about Wheeler's bank robberies, formulated a set of experiments to determine if Wheeler's juice beliefs were due to some kind of cognitive bias. Cognitive biases allow us to convince ourselves that something is true, even if the reality is different. Cognitive biases protect us from reality. They let us process information more quickly and they help us make decisions more quickly, but that doesn't mean that they are good. Cognitive biases are essentially a subjective social reality. The Dunning-Kruger effect is, in a nutshell, a way for everyone to feel good and above average internally, because most of us are actually completely average. Dunning-Kruger can help explain why people feel that they're experts even though they know very little about something, a problem sometimes described by this graph. The vertical axis is confidence, and the horizontal is experience. Imagine someone spent an hour reading the Wikipedia page about global warming, then took to Twitter to try and school some climate scientists who have literally spent their lives studying it. You don't have to imagine this, because you know it. It happens all the time. This cognitive bias is extremely common. For example, a 1992 survey of the engineers at one company found that 42% of them, 42%, believed they were in the top 5% of all the engineers at the company. But that's not actually possible. 42 cannot be 5. Another example is driving. One study found most people believe that they are above average at driving. But most people cannot be above the average. Another survey of people aged 77 years and older jived with that as well, most assuming they were average or above average. But again, that's not actually possible. Most people have to be average because that's how statistics work. The psychologists who first realized this bias was part of the human fabric did so in 4 studies: humor, logic and reasoning, and English grammar. We'll just take one. In the humor study, the psychologists asked 2 groups to rank jokes on a scale of 1 to 11, 1 being not at all funny and 11 being very funny. Group A was a set of average Cornell undergraduates, and Group B was a small set of professional comedians. The idea was to see if average people would believe that they were above average at picking out what was funny or as good as professionals. After Group A had ranked the jokes, the researchers asked them to compare their ability to pick what was funny against the professional comedians, to rate themselves. And unsurprisingly, on average, everyone overrated their skills. Remember, 50 is average, and the whole group together said that they did 66, which I would rank as an 8 out of 11 on our joke scale. But this is where the surprise comes in. Those who did the worst placed themselves in the 58th percentile on average. They believed that they were better than 57 other people out of 100. Their real score? The 12th percentile. They were worse than 88 other people. These were the victims of this newly discovered cognitive bias, the idea that people with a little bit of knowledge or skill in an area believe that they are better than they are. Dunning and Kruger went on to show that this bias exists multiple times with different experiments, like when assessing effective leadership, raising children, constructing a solid logical argument, and so on. Generally, in each study, the participants in the bottom 25% of scores consistently ranked themselves in the 70th percentile. It is worth pointing out that self-confidence is extremely important. Self-esteem is valuable. We should all feel good about ourselves. That said, we should also have a good assessment of what we're good at and what we are not good at. For example, I'm pretty good at making science videos. I am not very good at kung fu, farming, or financial policy. It's easy to dismiss Dunning-Kruger as just overinflated ego, but that's not actually what's happening. Even ego can see its own limits, and there are some serious examples of people not even realizing their own failures thanks to this bias. These experiments work not just in humor, logical reasoning, and rules of grammar, but also have been replicated in math skills, wine tasting, chess, firearm safety among hunters, and medical knowledge among surgeons. And that's where things get really serious. A 74-year-old woman awoke from a simple spinal fusion surgery in terrible pain because her surgeon believed himself to be one of the best around. Instead, he's now in prison for life. He's accused of maiming multiple patients and causing 2 deaths. Meanwhile, he claimed, quote, everybody's doing it wrong, and that he was, quote, the best in the whole state. It's pretty amazing that it took us so long to give Dunning-Kruger a name because it is everywhere. The more we look for it, the more we see it. That said, Dunning-Kruger doesn't apply to everything, namely in areas where it's easy to compare. Baking, for example. If you assume you're an amazing baker, then you bake a cake and it's inedible, it's pretty hard to deny that you're a terrible baker. One paper I read said that most people who play golf don't believe that they are as good as Tiger Woods when surveyed, but I would guess if we asked, they would still rate themselves above average. Because an online survey of over 1,700 average adults in Great Britain found that 1 in 8 men believed that they could score a point against Serena Williams, the woman ranked #1 in tennis for more than 6 years. That said, It's very important to point out the Dunning-Kruger effect is gender neutral. It applies to us all. Interestingly, though, Dunning-Kruger found the people at the top don't overestimate themselves. In fact, quite the opposite. Dunning-Kruger found the best around tend to rank themselves below their actual performance. Yeah, DK has two parts. People in the bottom 25% rank themselves at near the top, and people in the top 25 tend to rank themselves a bit lower than their actual score. This can help us understand why it is hard to counter Dunning-Kruger. In order to know you don't know anything, you gotta have to know something. An example, if your cognitive bias has you assume that you're amazing at driving, but you only drive in, say, rural areas of the desert Southwest, how would you ever find out that you're bad at it? You would need to drive around others or take classes.
So what's happening right now with what we just talked about with these people who think they're geniuses over the last 4 months? They've only driven when the sun's out, the road is dry, and there's no traffic. So how good a driver can you be when the sun's out, the road is dry, and there's no traffic? I've never been in an accident. So do you see how this is working? It's almost done here, but I'm going to finish it up.
To learn good driving habits or ride with someone who is objectively considered a good driver to see what you're doing wrong and then get that critique and recognize it and then learn. You think many of those people who believe they're good drivers are going to do those things? Yeah, I didn't think so either. In a bit of follow-up research, Dunning has found people who are low performers in reality are not good at accepting criticism and often don't show interest in self-improvement. He told Forbes, quote, research subjects were willing to criticize their own previous poor skills once they were trained up and could see the difference between their previous poor performance and their new.
So guys, how do we use this Dunning-Kruger effect? How do we overcome it with the 5Q system? How do we overcome the Dunning-Kruger effect? Well, first of all, not tapes. I mean, tapes are good. We overcome it. Oh, no, wait, I take it back. Nick, you're right. Tapes is how we overcome it for ourselves. You're absolutely right. That's how you're absolutely wrong there. You're absolutely right. Tapes are how we overcome it for ourselves. But how do we overcome, you got it, Mark, how do we overcome it for clients? Because again, have you ever met, or how many of your clients have you talked to that suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect? Lots or not very many? Everybody answer this. How many clients have you come across that have suffered from the Dunning-Kruger effect, where they think they know a lot about investing, but really they don't know anything? And how much research and how much experience and how much education have they given themselves? None. But they think they're what? And I'm not talking about the millennials now. I'm just talking about the straight all. You know, the reason I didn't work with physicians. Guess why I didn't work with physicians? This is the reason I didn't work with physicians. So how do we overcome it? Because if you try to prove to them that they're wrong, it says right here, people who are low performers are not good at accepting criticism and often don't show interest in self-improvement. Trying to prove somebody's an idiot, and that's what I did for 8 years. Making $50,000 a year is I proved to them that they were idiots. And guess how well that worked? Well enough for me to make $50,000. Well enough for me to lose 95% of every single dollar I got in front of. So the fix to the Dunning-Kruger effect, which affects probably 90% of the people we sit down with, is to what? Don't tell them what to do. Let them what? You're a facilitator for them to figure it out for themselves. That's right, Mark. For them to figure it out for themselves. For them to figure it out for themselves. That's right, Britta. So this is how we overcome. So we got about 1 more minute here, and then we'll move on. But I think this is worth for us to sear into our brain.
Improved performance, but to get them to train up on their own was very unlikely. If we never change the knowledge that we assume we have, then we can just keep on going, thinking we're amazing. Who doesn't want to do that? Even if we're not. Yay, cognitive biases. In the end, Dunning-Kruger is a cognitive bias that can affect anyone and everyone. If you're actually above average at any task, you might be undervaluing yourself. And if you're average or below average at some other tasks, you're probably assuming you're pretty good. In the age of the internet, everyone can be a quote-unquote expert. We all have access to infinite information. Our minds are drawn to learn a little bit about a lot of things. And that little bit of information is enough to make us weak-minded humans feel confident about what we know, even when we know nothing. And add to that the global platforms of social media, and then everyone can feel like an expert, and most won't accept any critique. Let's face it, I have probably been one of those people, and maybe you have too. It's crucial in today's overstimulated world to be able to differentiate a real expert from an overconfident novice. And that goes for understanding your value as well. The key is know your talent, understand your pitfalls, take criticism, and keep on learning. Way back in 1871, long before we knew what Dunning-Kruger was, Charles Darwin wrote, "Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge." And it turns out he was right. I wonder if Darwin would have rated himself as being above average on that one. Thanks so much for watching After School. It was awesome to get to work with Mark on this. I hope y'all liked it.
So guys, that's why I know it takes a lot of effort to do the 15-minute drill every day. But what you're doing is, first of all, you're overcoming, with a 15-minute drill, you're overcoming the Dunning-Kruger effect for yourself, because then you realize, gosh, I could be a lot better than I am. I'm not as good as I thought I was. But you're also learning the skills to help the clients overcome the client's Dunning-Kruger effect as well. Does that make sense? And you're doing that for 15. And how much does it cost you to do the 15-minute drill? How much does it cost you to do the 15-minute drill? Not a single cent. And if you think about it, how many minutes are there in the workday? So 15 minutes. What percentage of your workday is that taking? A huge amount or a small sliver of your workday? So something that costs you nothing time-wise, something that costs you nothing money-wise, that's going to help you overcome this. We just said everybody's saying they run into lots of clients. That's a worthwhile thing to do. Okay, that's a worthwhile thing to do. Make sense?
It scratches that.
Okay, so the main topic today is talking about women, though, especially women that when their husband dies and become widows. Let's look at the stats. Stats say that the mean age of a wife becoming widow is 59.4 years. Is that older or younger than you would assume? If I ask most people on the streets, do you think this would be older or younger than you assume? Yeah, it's a lot younger. 700,000 women lose their husbands each year. 70% of all women who are married will lose their spouse. See, this is why, on the non-financial, this is why women really gravitate towards the non-financial, because if they haven't experienced losing a spouse, has one of their friends or relatives experienced the loss of a spouse? Yes. See, that's why they really gravitate towards the non-financial. Death of a spouse is ranked as the #1 stressor because of the snowball effect. 60% who lose spouse will have a serious illness within 12 months. 75% of social support is lost. For the past 30 years, the rate of poverty among elderly widows is 3 to 4 times that of married women. See, that's why they get the non-financial things, being prepared for losing a spouse. They have experienced it through either themselves or their family or their friends. 70% of widows will end up firing their advisor after their spouse dies. So we need to know and understand widows. Widows confront years of undue hardship. So among women whose spouses had life insurance when they died, the life insurance proceeds lasted almost 2.5 years. So what do we in our unique selling proposition? What are we talking about here? This is how we say, are you using the plan that will replace your spouse's Social Security when they die? But they wish these funds would have lasted longer. 68% of women report significant life changes after the death of a spouse, with financial concerns at the top of the list. Feeling secure isn't the same as being secure. So adjusting to a change in income, 55, the top 5 life changes after the death of a spouse. 55% of women felt they had to change their, had to adjust to change for the change in income. Budgeting for one income, 46%. So do you see the pink here, which is women? They're much more concerned about safety. They realize their spouse can die. They've seen it. not having enough for retirement, not able to afford a vacation, cutting discretionary spending. They are much more conservative than their husbands because their husbands just think, what? Everything will take care of itself. 77% of women report feeling secure about their finances before the death of their spouse, but were faced with a very different picture afterwards. 2 in 5 women whose spouses did not have life insurance report the struggle to meet basic needs. 2 out of 5, 40% of women. 59% of women report they didn't have enough life insurance to place to feel financially secure. And 47% said that they wish they had more life insurance. So this, we can see that many women, when they lose their spouse, come into financial hardship. But on the other side of that coin, what? Women are becoming wealthier and wealthier on the other side of that. So in 2012, women controlled 51% of the assets. Look at what's happened in 2020, 67%. Because when men die, that leaves the women who inherit the money. So should we be good at understanding what women want from a financial advisor? You sure in the heck better be. Financial assets controlled by women. Look at what's happening. Boom, 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 boom. So this is from a deep research report that was done by Strategy Marketing, Why Women Leave Their Financial Advisors and How to Prevent It. So according to a recent survey of the Boston Consulting Group, 73% of women report being unhappy with the service levels they were receiving from the financial services industry. On the same subject, Investment News reported 70% of women switched financial advisors within a year of their husband's death. In Canada, it's even worse. So a woman brought you into this world, so you have no right to disrespect one. The problem is this: do most advisors feel they're disrespecting women? No. But does that matter if they don't feel they're disrespecting women? Does that matter? Perception is how much of reality? 100%. So just here's some examples of what women mentioned when they talked about the financial advisor. Measure yourself and ask yourself, am I doing any of these things? And remember, use the Dunning-Kruger effect. Don't tell yourself you're above average when you're not when it comes to these case studies, okay? So Wendy is 74 years old, recently widowed. She told us that in the 23 years that she and her husband used the services of the advisor, he never made an effort to reach out to her. In fact, she said in meetings, he rarely ever made eye contact with her. As a result, when her husband died, she felt no loyalty towards him, and didn't help that after the death of the husband, rather than listening to her concerns, he was like, you don't need to know that. Let me worry about that. I'll take care of you, little lady. Dudes, is that going to work in today's world with baby boomers? No. Case study number 2. Cindy, a 38-year-old unmarried woman with great career and good income, said that several advisors she approached talked down to her. I found many of their attitudes highly insulting, she complained. Some even suggested, well, your situation will change once you get married. Dudes, it never occurred to them that she might never marry. Case study number 3. When John married, he and his wife, Mandy, wanted to be equally involved in their future financial decisions, so they made an appointment with John's advisor, an old family acquaintance. From the start, Mandy said he treated her like an interloper, didn't include her in meetings at all except to make crude ball and chain jokes. He mistakenly just assumed that she would have no input and that the relationship with John was rock solid. But when Mandy told John how displeased she was, that guy's always said, who wears the pants in the family? Who wears the pants in the family? So John had been with this advisor forever because he was an old family acquaintance. And but when Mandy told John how displeased she was, he was quite willing to find an advisor who could work with both. What happened to his great relationship with an old family acquaintance when the wife said, we ain't working with this guy anymore? What happened to it? Poof, that's right. Poof. Chatting over coffee with a good friend recently, the topic financial security came up. Amanda was frustrated with her advisor and wondered if she was being unreasonable. After many years of limited contact, often amounting to no more than an email once a year, she reached out to him. She wanted details on her investments and specifically wanted to know how he was being compensated, a question that he had always brushed off with, oh, don't worry about that. I'm paid on the other side. I don't charge you. Guys, I've heard so many advisors do this. When you say you do not, is that what we say with our FIA presentation? That don't worry about it. That we're paid by the company. When you say that, is that being honest? And do advisors say this kind of crap all the time? I've heard it, guys. I've heard it before when advisors come onto the 5Q system, and I listen to some of their tapes when they're early on in the process, and it's like, you cannot do that. You cannot do that. But now, after hearing something about changes to how fees were going to be reported, she insisted on a clear answer. His response was, he did not call but sent a complex legal document, email attached, about the new regulations and a rather defensive note about that he had to make money. Turns out that his services were, in fact, costing him more than $3,000 per year, and she wasn't sure what she paid for. After 2 weeks, guess what she did? Left him. Make sense? And these case studies are not isolated incidents. They echo common themes over and over and over again. Additionally, many women reported not only that were their advisors not listening to their needs, they were actually dictating them to how they would do business. They did hear things like, here's how I do business, said one advisor, who then launched into a discussion about asset versus commission-based fees. If you have any questions, call me, said another, leaving the responsibility for information gathering and communications up to her. Here's how I report to you, another intoned, who proceeded to show her a sample statement with a bewildering array of charts and asset allocation categories. How does 5Q avoid these things? How does 5Q avoid these things? Do we ever dictate anything to a client? Do we ever tell, sell, preach, or teach to a client? Yes, we use motivational interviewing. We let them tell us. Guys, I have an abrasive, aggressive personality. And yet if you ever talk to Missy, the women with the couple, I had tons of widows, tons of single women, tons of divorced women, and tons of women in couples who adored me as their advisor. It certainly wasn't because of my personality. Why was it? Because I was an expert at motivational interviewing. I never dictated anything to them. They always understood what was happening, not because I told them what was happening, because they told me what was happening. And when we whip out charts and hypotheticals and spreadsheets, you know, investing is confusing. Different people invest in different things, different investment products. There's all sorts of different products out there, different procedures, dollar cost averaging, sell, when to buy, when to sell, brokerage saving. See, all these things, we take these things for granted because we do them every day. How often do our clients do these things? Rarely. That's why we take it at a snail's pace. That's why we repeat ourselves in different ways, but repeat the concept over and over and over so the client understands it after they've done it 2 or 3 or 4 different times. Here's another stat. Only 43% of investors say my financial advisor has asked me for my preferred method of communication. That means the majority have not. Advisors frequently don't realize that their behavior is perceived. See, this is the thing. Advisors aren't trying to be mean. They don't realize their behavior is perceived as disrespectful by their female clients. Simply put, it is hard to change entrenched habits and attitudes. According to Hillary Martin, a money behaviorist, a financial advisor and strategist, banks and brokerages and other related firms don't treat women with respect because the financial community is largely male-dominated. And much of the language they still use about money is very ego-based, and women don't relate well to it. Yeah, Britt is saying, as a female advisor, this has driven me nuts since I joined the industry. So this is a problem. We don't try to be, but when you talk in terms of what's important to men, and we all know that men and women generally view money, as we just saw, and things differently because they have different experiences than men. Women have different experiences than men. Their mother had to take care of their father for 10 years when he was disabled. Their mother had an aunt who became poor once the husband died because he didn't do a good job with the money. So they've realized things. They've lived a life that men have not lived. So you have to. That's why we cannot dictate to them. We cannot tell, sell, preach, or teach to them. They have to tell us what's important in their life. They have to tell us whether they understand something or not. They have to tell us whether they are being dealt with in the manner that they want. So those are the problems. How do we fix it? Well, first of all, listen with your heart. Better to be authentic than perfect. Now, here's the thing. We give you scripts. But if you're an automaton and a robot and just do those scripts without listening to the client, what's it going to get you? Nothing. It's going to get you nothing. So what is the 15-minute rule of, what is the 15-minute drill is about? Making you a better what? Better at communication, a better listener. If you look at all the things that we want you to look at with the 15-minute drill, guess what every one of those skills are doing? Gotzing them gets the client to talk more. Laughing at their jokes gets the client to talk more. Not over-talking them gets the client to talk more. Giving them either empowering them gets the client to talk more. Falling on the sword when they make a mistake gets them to talk more. Falling on the sword when they say, I don't know, gets them to talk more. Every single one of those 15-minute drills is about getting the client more comfortable with talking more and you listening more. And remember, can we read our clients' minds? Yes, we can. If we what? Ask them what's on their minds. And it's a yes-no question asking them what's on their minds. No. Who, what, where, why, when, how. Have any of you been doing, how about some feedback here? Have any of you been doing the who, what, where, why, when, how drill that I gave you here a couple of months ago, where you find an article and you do who, what, where, why, when, how question with a sentence in that article, or you open up the dictionary and you do who, what, where, why, when, how question with a word in the dictionary? If you do that every single day, how much better are you going to be at being authentic and listening to people? Because when you ask who, what, why, where, when, how, you're saying what's on your mind, what's important to you, what do you understand, what don't you understand? Does that make sense? Some hints on how to do this. Ask her what she wants from the relationship, her preferred style of communication, how often and where she wants to meet. Talk to her directly. Make eye contact. Listen to her views. Be supportive. Gots her. A recent Globe and Mail article cited TD Wealth research in which the male and female participants were asked to create a collage of their investment goals using images. The women produced pictures of family, beaches, life experiences, and aspirational views. The men showed things like hot cars, graphs, and dollar signs. Again, do women and men view money and security in investing the same? Now, could some women show hot cars, graphs, and dollar signs? Sure. Could some men show families, beaches, and life experience and aspirational views? Sure. With the 5Q system, does it matter? No. Why? Because we ask questions and they'll tell us what's important. Yeah, we listen. That's right. Second thing is respect, 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 respect. Here's some hints. Be respectful of her schedule. Make time when she calls. Go to her location if she's more comfortable with that. Have her come to you if she's more comfortable with that. Meet in person when possible. Do favors for her. So, especially with women, remember we said how many times a year does a client that's loyal, not satisfied, but actually loyal and gives you referrals on a regular basis, how many non-financial contacts do you need to hit them with per year? Non-financial, not an investment newsletter, not a let's meet and talk about your investments. You got it, Kevin, 24. 24 makes a client loyal. So you got to talk to her about things other than just the money. Refer her to experts on other issues. Listen, how complicated is it to know whether to buy or lease a car? Do you have a resource for that you can help people with? How complicated is it to know whether to take a loan or pay off in a lump sum getting new windows for your house? Should you pay off your home or not? These are things that that you can help people with. You don't have to be an expert on it. Refer them to other experts. Listen to concerns patiently, without judgment. That's where, guys, we have to slow down when we're talking to people, not speed up. Because as soon as somebody says something, guess what we want to do? Process it or jump in with our own 2 bits. We want to jump in. Ask what she thinks. Next one is build our confidence. According to BNY Mellon and Pershing study, half the women surveyed want their advisor to make them a smart investor. Do we do that with 5Q? Or do we tell, sell, preach, teach? But it doesn't mean hauling out the PowerPoint presentation and launching into complex discussions about betas and alphas and PE ratios. It means answering your questions. It's about helping her understand where she is now, where she's going, and how to get there. Does the 5Q system do this? Yes. And what else we do? Well, what's our unique selling proposition about? I get homeowners born before 1956 in Olmsted County, 21 little known benefits they're owed but not receiving, including a program to make sure your wife doesn't lose half her Social Security income when they pass away. Why do I use wife here? Why is it wife instead of spouse? Why is it wife instead of spouse? Because men think what? I'll never have this problem. But have women seen their aunt, their mother, their friend? Have they seen this happen to their mother, aunt, or friend? Yes. And they realize what happened. So that's why we use that. A program to 2 years of long-term care costs without paying a cent of annual premiums. Again, who ends up going to the long-term care facility first, her or him? And what's that do to the finances? Talk about Social Security and getting the most possible. There are different, if Susan had signed up correctly at age 62, she would have gotten 42 versus age 70, 24.64. If she signed up incorrectly as a widow, she would have gotten a huge hit. They need to understand that. And again, just don't talk to the guy, talk to the couple. And remember, this is where the wife decides, am I going to work with this advisor or keep working with the one I don't like? The non-financial. How many minutes should you be into a meeting before you're done with the non-financial? How long should this non-financial take at least? Yeah, it should be at least an hour on this. Longer is better, not worse. See, we got to show that we're different and that we care. And how do we show that we care? Do we charge anything? How much value in dollars are people getting? Oops. How much dollar value are people getting for these non-financial things? Bucks or thousands of dollars for the value. And then our advisor does not have our best interest at heart. And do we do that by telling them or letting them on for the first time? How many of you sat down with a couple for the first time in the spouse who does not take care of the investments? The spouse that does not take care of the investments, for the first time in their life, they say, holy crap, I get what's happening here, and I don't like it. And then what choice does the spouse that supposedly didn't know what was going on, what choice do they have at that point? They can either say, yeah, I knew our guy was screwing us, or, oh, my God, I just figured this out, too. We got to get away from this guy. Which one are they going to choose? Throw their advisor under the bus now that their spouse knows what's going on, or say that they knew they're getting screwed continually for the last 10 years? Throw them under the bus, stay with their guy, and explain that they knew they were getting screwed. Which one? Yeah, throw under the bus. But can you tell them that, or do you have to let them discover it? They have to discover it for themselves. You have to take your time. Guys, it's miraculous that we can get somebody to move who woke up that morning, who loved their advisor, who their advisor was their son, and they loved their advisor, and 90 minutes to 2 hours later, they're moving all their money to us. That's a miracle. Getting a tire kicker and a plate licker and tire kicker to move their assets to us after 90 minutes to 2 hours, that is a miracle. But we can't do it any faster. You got to go through the steps. Make sense? Super duper. So did y'all learn something today? Give me some yays or nays. Awesome. Coolio. So remember, when you've mastered the scripts motive, your daily practice of myths, gots, 5-minute money makers and breakdowns, that's when you're going to bring on every client you want. It's when you're going to start getting referrals like you never dreamed of. And remember, master that 2-minute referral script as well. Super. You guys thanks for being on today. Appreciate all you guys and gals. And you have a great rest of the week, and we'll talk to y'all next Monday. Thanks, everybody.